what it's like to coach now and play is I had to slow down and start thinking a little bit more.
Use a dry erase to draw plays for the practice because there's no map.
I'm an aggressive person, still to this day.
I'm not married, I don't have kids. I really love this.
The trust factor of him suggesting something and me believing him.
If I were to put him in and we wound up getting relegated by 1 point, I don't think I'd ever be able to live with myself.
He could say the right thing to get the best out of you.
When you look at Paul Richards and his impact on the game, I mean, obviously you start with his resume.
His record speaks for itself. You know, with damage, he had so much success.
Paul's impact on paintball, there's not enough time in the interview to say everything. He's revolutionized the game over and over, and those who played it.
Paul Richards may have had one of paintball's most revolutionary coaching minds, but his pathway into the sport was anything but radical.
I had a teenage son who saw a magazine that had paintball in it, and he thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and we had to go try. It was, one of those things that a father and son could do together, so I was happy to support his interest in playing.
As paintball began to take the shape of a traditional sport in the early 2000s, new opportunities were also emerging on the sidelines.
I had played for a handful of Florida teams when X-Ball got started in the PSP. A lot of people understood that they needed some kind of assistance in putting their teams together and figuring out exactly what this new game was going to be like. And I knew a few guys in Central Florida who were interested in starting a divisional team, and they asked me to come in and work with them.
People quickly began taking notice of Richards' keen intellect. This led to his first professional coaching opportunity with Detroit Strange.
The best part of it for me was really the fact that I was reunited with my kid, because his paintball career had kind of diverged from my recreational and small time tournament thing, because once he got serious, he wanted to see how far he could go and how good he could be. There came a point where dragging Dad along wasn't going to cut it anymore, and he had to go do his own thing.
He teaches shooting regular. He can shoot Texas whole corner.
Richards' innovative mind was not limited to field diagrams. He began to make waves within the professional circuit with his product concepts as well, catching the eyes of many players that he would eventually go on to coach.
First time I met Paul, I feel like we were all standing around. I think he was coaching Doc's Raiders at the time, and he was showing us the speed feed, his first speed feed he had come out with. And I think we had seen it in the tournament before. It was at Huntington Beach when he first debuted it, and we were blown away by we were like, dude, is there a lid? How the paintball stand that loader? And the next tournament we were talking to him because Alex was like, we need to get those.
By the end of the decade, coaches had become an integral part of the game. However, Paul Richards' style made him the odd man out among his coaching colleagues at the time. He was neither a recently retired professional paintball player, nor an intense fire and brimstone screamer.
David! David!
His approach was different, but his success was undeniable.
I think what made Paul a great coach was he really made it, anyone and everyone believe in themselves. All the way from the guys like Archie, who believes in himself and everything he does, down to the guys like Jesse, who were filled with doubt, didn't know if he was gonna play, didn't know if he had a roster spot, didn't know how long he'd stay on the team.
Paul Richards made a huge impact on me. He came in during the 2013 season, a time where I was really figuring out who I was. I was learning a handful of life lessons on and off the field.
Paul took the time to evaluate you as an individual and see your flaws and then make them your strengths without you knowing and without tearing you down.
It was special to really know him and be close to him, because it was more than just paintball. It was about life.
I feel like it's like an iceberg, man. I feel like we got like 10% of what Paul really could have done in this sport.
Okay, let's go, boys. Grayson, next point. You and Archie both, next point.
You know, I think the game was catching up to him, you know, and that's why we, you know, I think there was still a lot for him to give to the sport. And that's why, you know, when I heard the news, I was so bummed. Like, I mean, I was, you know, it really shook me because I felt that way, that he had a lot more to share with this sport, and it was cut short.
Even as his last days were growing near, Paul Richards was helping young paintball players realize their potential until the very end.
We went into Florida, practice damage, and we were really fortunate enough to have Paul Richards coach us and work with us. Having him as a coach, you know, just for that one practice. The 187 guys being so young, they really looked up to that, and they've never had a coach of that caliber with that resume, with that winning experience come and talk to them and give them that perspective that he has and that knowledge. And there was confidence there that stemmed from that, and then from him, you know, the knowledge that, hey, he's supposed to be at Dallas, which unfortunately he wasn't because he was ill, and then he was going to come and work with us in Boston.
The ability to motivate people and, you know, allow somebody to see their true potential is one of the most powerful things you can show anyone.
Honestly, my favorite Paul moment, probably in the hotel room when we were talking about snoring. So I was like, yeah, if I wake up, just throw a pillow at me. And he's like, yeah, if I wake you up, just throw a pillow back at me.
Favorite Paul moment? I mean, obviously when he stayed in my home, that was cool. And we had a dog named Max, a little French bulldog. They went to liking each other. He'd come to our home and Max would see him, he'd like, oh, I know that guy. And he comes here maybe once a month, but I know that guy.
My fondest memory of Paul was looking into the pit after we won World Cup and just seeing, you know, all the emotion come out.
My favorite story about Paul Richards happened when we won World Cup. I had a habit of, before every game, asking Paul just, you know, what kind of tips and what kind of things I needed to work on for the next point, you know, for the next match. For the impact game, I asked him, you know, like I always do, I was like, hey, you know, Coach Richards, what do you want me to focus on for this game? And he just looked at me and he goes, Colt, just go out there and do what you do. This is going to happen. And he kind of just smiled and shrugged, and you know, we went out there and it happened.
My favorite moment from a fan of Paul's, like watching, is when they won World Cup with X Factor.
You'd see it in everyone's eyes, but him especially, because he came into a team and, you know, brought ambition back to X Factor. And so to see that come to fruition in his year with us, it was, you know, I'll never forget that.
Obviously, Paul Richards doesn't have to have any validation on his career, but in my eyes, it was like, and he went to X Factor and they won World Cup.
You know, as far as paintball goes, that's the ultimate. Win World Cup. He went out as a champ. He's a champion in my heart.
Paul Richards may have left this world after just 58 years, but he will not be leaving the hearts and minds of paintball anytime soon.
Paul's a great guy because he was selfless and dedicated everything he had to the game. And if you were lucky enough to be coached by him, he dedicated everything he had to you.
There's no other like Paul, to be honest with you. He did so much for so many kids. You know, in the paintball industry, it's just ridiculous.
Like what I'm doing now with BKI and coaching, it's not to make money, it's to motivate people and have people see their true potential in themselves through paintball. And that's something that Paul made me realize.
Paul Richards, he really helped me become the player I am.
You know, I know there's kids out there that are heartbroken and crying, but he's in a good place. Yeah, he even made an impact on my kids. You know, my two sons actually. You know, my boys got to know him, and he's a great person. He's going to be, you know, missed big time.
You know, I only knew him for a year, but you know, as a coach, but it, he definitely had a lasting impression that, I mean, I'll remember for the rest of my life.